So it's come to this. I'm recording on a microphone, like like a YouTube guy. But anyways, it's a new thing. So I want to start a new idea called Teach the Professor or Teach the Prof, where I invite someone on, an expert in like a different field, a different area of music, usually hip hop, who will like help me learn more about something. So I don't know much about Central Cee, except when I said to my 17-year-old daughter I was going to be covering her, she's like, Dad, no, we all hate Central Cee. Ask my brother. We all hate Central Cee. And then I put up a poll and he came in last, and everyone hates Central Cee. So let's figure out why do people hate Central Cee? I'm going to invite James Francis from the UK to come here and talk with us about it. See you soon. All right, so we're here with James Francis, JF. How do you like to be referred to?
Either one, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay. Like, so is that like your pen name? Like, are you James Francis and that's like your actual name too, or?
Yeah, it's my actual name. It's so funny. My account name, JF Musics, I made it when I was like 15
Okay.
because I'm not sure you can see in the back. I play double bass.
Oh, nice.
Um, so I made an Instagram account to like do like my classical stuff. And then just kept it. I archived all my stuff and then started posting hip hop stuff.
Well, it's awesome because like as a professor, I have all these students who will email me and their emails will be like, funny banana sloth 22, and they're asking me about how to write a 10-page paper. But we're
Yeah.
we're going to get more into sort of who you are later, but just briefly, who are you?
Who am I? Who am I in the hip hop space? I'm a rapper. I do other things as well. I do some analysis stuff. I do some graphic design. I do some music production. But in the hip hop space, I do analysis. I do some breakdown stuff. I do some like rapping techniques, different like linguistic stuff. That's tangential. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think I discovered you probably through Justin Hunt, who's like the great unifier of
Shout out Justin
everybody.
Hunt. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't have an applause thing, but I would do it if I had it.
9 second
Yeah,
applause.
exactly. And so I mean, because I don't spend that much time on Instagram, and I see most of your stuff on Instagram. And later we'll talk about sort of like how people can find you. But obviously, as
Mhm.
people may be able to tell, you are not actually American. Where are you located,
I
roughly?
am not. I am from London. I'm from London in the UK. Yeah.
Okay, and that's one of the things that we'll talk about. So I want to talk about Central Cee. I want to talk about how come, even though it's one of the biggest albums to release this week, I put out a poll and like nobody voted for it. They all wanted me to talk about FKA Twigs instead, and I
Oh,
had a
right, okay.
a whole bunch of hate towards Central Cee in the comments. My daughter was like, "Dad, you can't review Central Cee. He cheated on his girlfriend or some kind of mess like that." So can you tell me why the hate for Central Cee?
Yeah, I've been trying to think of how to frame this. Okay. I can give a global perspective and then like a UK perspective. I'll start with the
Okay.
UK perspective.
Okay.
Um, so a lot of people from the UK feel basically because Accenture's public image, from a UK perspective, is kind of like being the face of UK rap right now,
Yep.
anyway. And I think that frustrates some people because Central C is basically just not really the most artistic export of the UK. There are so many other MCs that like are just more artistic.
Right.
And so I think that part frustrates some people. Like, for example, um, Dave, for example, he is
Yes.
a much more artistic
Yeah.
artistic rapper. And so I think some people get frustrated that a lot of like the US's ex like exposure to UK rap is Central C. Um, for me personally, I'm kind of like the way that I see Central C is kind of like how I think the way that both of us see like a West Side Gun. Like this is
Okay.
going to be a really weird comparison in
All
terms
right.
of like
I dig it.
West Side Gun. I'm not listening to him because like I'm not expecting a Kendrick experience.
Right.
Um, I'm listening to him for well, partly because of the sonics of it, partly because of the world that like West Side Gun is building and that it's
Right.
entertaining. And so I think people have the same in like the same framing of investment in Central Cee.
Right.
But yeah, that's why some people hate him mainly because I feel like he approaches stuff very much through a marketing lens
Yeah.
more than he does through an artist lens.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that marketing because he's very clearly the most explicitly international, and the way that he thinks internationally is
Hmm.
it's pretty wild that other British rappers haven't thought to do what he thought to do, which, he calls himself the only really European rapper because he raps, I mean, I think the first song I ever heard with him was the Freeze Corleone song because I listen to a lot of French rap.
Oh, okay.
And then he also like moved to Hollywood and like is a Hollywood guy. And so he calls himself that and everyone else. So yeah, so that must be why. So then I'm thinking like, why is it that Americans would be angry at him? What's your suspicion there?
Why Americans? Okay, so I think okay, part of it is the marketing side. So I think a lot of Central C's marketing, he deliberately plays into controversy. It's so
Mhm.
weird because as an artist, I see stuff and just like that's so obviously marketing. But I think
Right.
for a TikTok audience, they don't see it that way. Like a lot of the whatever, the mad stuff. Like for me, like a lot of that was marketing, and
Right.
it was very clearly marketing. But I think on TikTok, people take things at such like face value.
Right.
But yeah, he knows how to manipulate that. And I think like a lot of UK people are not even really thinking about that, or are not thinking about marketing from that perspective. And if they are, Central C is just better at it.
Right.
So
So
yeah.
so I had sort of a more racially based thought, which is that he sort of has what Ariana Grande and The Rock had, which is a racial ambiguity, which he clearly uses
Mhm.
to his advantage. And then on top of that, Americans have no understanding of race outside of America. Like, okay, I mean, with the current administration, we don't have any understanding of race inside America either. But like the quote that I always bring up is when I was in Paris, I was on the metro with a bunch of other
Yeah.
Americans, and one of them said in a very loud American voice, and I can't believe they said it. Oh my God, there's so many African Americans in Paris. And like she didn't understand that like no, there's actually not that many African Americans. You're talking about Africans because Americans like were not particularly well versed on post-colonial politics,
Yeah.
and so we can only conceive of rap. There's a similar story with Russell Simmons, one of the founders of Def Jam, driving around in France saying like, "There's black people in Europe," like having no idea of the post-colonial situation that's being played out. And that's part of like one of the goals of my channel is to help express that other part of hip hop. It's first and foremost for and by Black Americans, but then it's also a tool created by Black Americans for the rest of the world, no matter what they are. So, like, in order to understand Central Cee's story, you have to understand Guyana and like
Yeah.
Guyana is so, I mean, I was doing research on it. So it was a British colony, but they had already outlawed slavery. So they had to just exploit Indian workers. And so they imported Indian workers and exploited them as much as they possibly could. And then it's still this weird like area, and 80% of the people who can move out of Guyana do. So there's this huge
Yeah.
outflow into England. And it's this whole story, all these people's lives. And Americans, I think they just see a rapper who is not white, who can pass as white, and just go either, oh, good, I like him because I think he might be white and they're racist, or I don't like him because other people might like him because they think he's white. And anyways, it's
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I feel like the American cultural blindness
yeah,
is a bit of America's brand a bit at the moment, which isn't
yeah,
probably not the best. But yeah, I think in terms of UK influence, we've really got like Caribbean influence because of the Windrush generation to the UK. And in terms of like most of UK rap, those will be like second generation, like
yeah,
from like having immigrant parents. Um, so yeah, it's a really the UK, especially England and especially London is just like hyper diverse.
right,
Um, so I feel like that also plays a part of it from a UK perspective of like it becomes like people still will have like a concept of like North London, South London, and like being from an area, but as like a perspective, it's very much a melting pot of like, oh, like everyone just sees like, oh, you're just from London.
Right. Yeah, so it's anyways, that would be my main thing to say about anybody who sees him because he might get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, just don't think that you understand his story because I think
Yeah,
I mean, what's interesting is, Loyal Corner is another British rapper who actually I
Lyrical
paid
is amazing.
yeah, a Patreon paid me to review his album. I'm like, I can't believe I got paid to review this great album, but I'll take it. And he's another guy where I think it's almost the same situation where I think his father was Guyanese and his mother was white, and like a very kind of similar situation. But again, I think maybe that's tying into the second question I had: where does he fit in the larger landscape of UK rap? It sounds like what you're saying is he's not that different than a lot of other UK rappers. He's just not trying to be smart, and he's way more successful at getting out there. Is that a good summary?
I'd say yes. I'd say yes and no. Okay, so the comparison that I've been avoiding making
Are
is
you
I
are you going
feel
to say
like
Drake?
feel like Central Cee is kind of like UK Drake in a lot
Of
of senses.
of
Not in
course.
every sense, in terms of like what Drake's doing right now.
Yes.
But
Not in
in
every
terms
sense.
of yeah, not in every sense, but yeah, definitely in terms of like you said, like that racial tension, that like that is part of well, for Drake as part of his brand, he talks about it a lot.
Yep.
Um, but also yeah, just in terms of the his approach to working with people, like even like if you think of like the first song even on this album, like when he's talking about like if it wasn't for the work that I did in Europe, like basically like him opening doors for people, and it's such a Drake attitude of like
Yeah.
even Drake's attitude when he came to the UK of like working with UK artists and
Yep.
basically like turning around in the beef being like I put all of you on like it's a similar mentality. I think it's not I don't know. I feel like I'm still deciding on like because obviously there can be a pernicious side of that
Right.
but I don't think it's as like malicious as sometimes the Drake stimulus package can be. I think
Yeah.
it's more of Central C being an opportunist than it is.
And and the fact that there's not more people exploiting international rap is not Drake's fault either. I mean,
Mhm, yeah,
I
true.
mean, Drake does have an advantage through his birth, which is the simple fact that he's not American. And like when you're an American, and I mean, you're British, so you sort of understand the kind of ridiculous imperialist thinking that goes on. But I imagine not quite the same as a white American. But like he's understood how to make rap international and how to work. And that's why I think Drake does have a future, but Drake's future has to be like, I'm going to do an album and every song is going to have a different rapper from South America, and it would go, like, because he can do it. And, positioning himself as the World Cup rapper instead of the Super Bowl rapper is brilliant. And he really could do it, but I don't think he will because, anyways, he just wants to be the king of America. And
Yeah.
what are you going to do? So the next question is maybe too big of a one, but what's the one thing you wish Americans would know about UK rap?
That it doesn't all sound the same.
We have the
Basically,
same notes, James Francis, because I wrote sound the same.
yeah, that it doesn't all sound the same. I feel like maybe that's also the other side of why Central C gets under people's skin. It's
Hmm.
because a lot of like Central C's writing is so formulaic.
Right.
That's also the other comparison to Drake. Like even the more introspective cuts on the album, they all follow the same format. He always uses the same flow, the same writing style.
Yep.
Um, and it's in line with a lot of other UK drill. But the UK is so much more diverse in terms of like for example, my favorite, well, what I said on record anyway, is my favorite UK rap album is No Thank You by Lil Sims,
Right.
which is fantastic album. She's got even more ambitious albums than that.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just a hip hop album. She's very much like Kendrick influenced, like
Right.
people like Stormzy, Wretch, Gets, like all these different people who have such different sounds. And especially like the UK underground, super, super, super diverse.
Yeah, I think a lot of the problem is, I mean, one of the things that we need to credit British rap with is that they don't rap in an American accent, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I've grown up my entire life hearing Mick Jagger saying like, "Well, I'm going." It's like, shut up, man. You're not. You're from South London. You're not from the southern part of the United States. And much like French rappers were brave enough to rap in French, British rappers are brave enough to rap in an accent. The problem is Americans cannot tell the difference between British. Most Americans probably could not tell you Australian versus English. Like that's just the kind of sad truth. So I
Yeah.
think that that leads to the sort of sameness. And that's one of the exciting things about this album because I've reviewed a bunch of Lil Sims. I actually prefer her EPs to her LP. I know a lot of people love that LP, but I like her in sort of like this
Oh man,
conspiracy.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So drop six, I think, is my favorite project of hers. I thought that sometimes I might be
Nice.
introverted was good, but it just felt a little bit too like trying to be big. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
very grandiose. That's why I
yeah,
prefer No Thank You because I feel like it's a more
yeah,
stripped back, it's a more stripped back like Simbi, but
yeah,
like still with all of the content.
yep.
But
And
yeah, no,
and
I
then
really like Drop Six.
And then psychodrama, I mean, I just by
Hmm.
Dave, I mean, I thought his last album was not quite as good, but like it was great to hear Dave and Central C together and understand that they're friends and then hear them. And then there was a moment listening to this album where I heard Skepta come on and I'm like, I can tell the difference. This is not Central C. I know the difference between Skepta and Central C. I felt like I was going to give myself a little like, Union Jack pin, which speaking
Yeah.
of, the cover. Is he having a laugh? Is he taking the piss? What is this
Yes.
cover of him wearing a Union Jack
Yeah.
headscarf and holding up a portrait of the Queen as a medallion?
Again, from my perspective anyway,
Right,
it's playing to a US audience, right? Like
right.
it's leaning into every
Yeah,
stereotype to play to a US audience.
he's
And
like
I
in a
feel
double
like
decker bus, and wearing a beefeater hat, and
yeah, it's very again, this is where I'm like Central C for me is like so much marketing, like
yeah,
understanding marketing, and I feel like that's also again the thing that frustrates some people from the UK because it's kind of like at a level in order to play on like that global scale, you've got to make oversimplifications in terms
yeah,
of your marketing, in terms of your like global presentation. And so again, in my head, it's like the Drake Kendrick distinction of like, okay, you want to be global, so you're going to oversimplify. So, do we want the face of like UK rap to be the person who oversimplifies or the person who has substance, which is
right.
really the Central C Dave conversation. There's other MCs who I would also put in that conversation in terms of like a Gets or a Wretch.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah.
want to I wanted to ask like if there was like one song we could give people as homework to like just listen with open ears. Do you have like sort of one song that you wish Americans would listen to get it? Or is that too
Oh,
much?
yeah, this is so difficult. I feel
I might go
like
with your verse on Crazier. If you haven't seen James Francis's verse on Crazier, the Jid song, I mean the Absol song with Jid, that was like wow. This is like because like a lot of YouTube comment, a lot of rap commentators are also rappers, and then when they remind you
yeah.
that they're also rappers, it's pretty awesome. So yeah, but
Yeah, especially Rob Markman is insane.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but yeah, I'm trying to think. It's probably a Dave song.
yeah.
I'd say probably Heart Attack on We're All Alone in This Together. Like
Okay,
it's a really long song. It's like a 9 minute song.
okay.
But the
Really
writing
get
is
used to
so
it.
good.
Yeah.
The writing is so good. I feel like Dave gets loads of like like UK Kendrick comparisons.
Yep.
I would say Dave is more UK J. Cole if I was to be
Okay.
completely honest. Like I think I'd probably put like a Gets as more of like a UK Kendrick in terms.
Okay.
I think it makes it's different in terms of like influence, but in terms of writing style.
Okay, so you,
But
you're
yeah.
gonna have to forgive me for being an American chauvinist here, but it is kind of funny that like J. Cole is how a lot of Americans perceive of British people, like apologizing too much, like a little too polite. You know what I mean? Like,
That's hilarious.
but not me. I'm just saying, the perception.
Yeah,
Okay, so I thought, this is going to be my official review of the album, sort of with you.
cool.
So I thought, sort of, this is this is my favorite Central C album. I've never listened to his albums before. So it starts off with the track No Introduction. And one thing that I
Mhm.
liked, and I found this throughout the album, is it's only once do I hear it going full drill. So I associate full drill being it's and the
Yeah,
little bass, was it 808 slide? Is that what it's
like an
called?
AO, yeah, AOS
Yeah.
slide.
And I like, to me, it feels like elevated drill because it's not just the same. And I feel the same way with trap. Anytime they do like one different thing with the trap song and it's still a trap song, I'm like, that's elevated because you just get so tired of the same sounds. So right off
Mhm.
the bat, I thought this was trying to be elevated drill. Did you kind of hear that?
Yeah, I feel like again to go back to your original like your first question on like why do people hate Central C so much? I think he has definitely like he's definitely carved his own lane in terms of like this like elevated drill sound.
Okay.
The only thing is that he does it all the time. So
Okay.
if you're used to him as an artist, it can feel very
Right.
one note, but comparatively to some other drill, like the production is pushing boundaries.
Right. And then come on, doing a whole verse about Harry Potter. UK's not what you've seen on the film, bro. It's the block with the longest wand, Deathly Hallows, fill your chamber. How about just
Yeah.
like, I mean, but I do like, it ends with, hunt this dawn, which dawn is a British slang, right, for a person. And I
Mhm.
I think I like it. I think because this is the thing. What you want is what I call the Taco Bell effect. So I never ate Mexican food because I grew up in Boston and there wasn't many Mexican people around, right? And so I ate Taco Bell and I learned to love Taco Bell. It's a fast food chain in America, by the way. I don't think you have them in England. It's not very good.
We've got Taco Bell. There's
Oh,
one
geez.
in like Baker Street. Yeah, we've
Okay.
we've got Taco Bell, we've got Popeyes as well. Now it's
Yeah.
crazy.
So that was how I learned to love Mexican food. And then I moved and I started eating Mexican food. And then I hated Taco Bell because I was a snob now. But it's like I never would have learned the vocabulary. So my hope is that people get into Central C, they learn what he's about, they see the Union Jack and go, "Oh, he must be from England," right? And then they learn to love him enough that they then go, "I'm not into that Central C garbage. That's for babies. I like the real stuff." Like that's
Yeah.
the real hope. And I think if people are really rooting against him, it might be short-sighted because it really might be a boat that I mean a tide that rises all boats in a way that I don't think Drake could have been for Canada, or at least he wasn't trying to be.
Yeah, I agree. I agree about Central C being like that like digestible like
Yeah.
gateway drug to UK rap. That's why I think I'm a bit split about the whole hating thing because I think like this is just a good digestible album.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could see how someone would hate this. I mean, some of the lines are corny. Like it's funny because on Five Star, which is the next song, I was like, I'm already a little tired of the drill hi-hats. This is a bad sign. I'm on track two. Tss, tss, tss.
Yeah.
Um, he does a trick twice on the album where he leaves off the last word and you have to fill it in yourself. And this is like him not being homophobic by not saying they're sus. I think
Oh
they might be
yeah,
gay.
yeah.
And I don't. Hey, is that more homophobic than actually saying it? I think so, maybe. I will say that thematically, this album does get to be, maybe this is all of his stuff, pretty one note. So, I'm not a big fan of I Got rapping. I mean, I don't mind it, but I get bored of I Got, so I got this. And then there's the
Hmm.
development of that, which is I got this, I used to have that. And so this album is just all. I got this. I used to have that. I got this. I
Yeah.
used to have that. Everything's different. Nothing's different. Everything's the same. Um, but yeah, but in looking at the online discourse, I found that Gata track 3 was the most popular. Is that your experience in England?
I think so. I think so. I mean, obviously counting the things that like things that weren't singles beforehand.
Right,
Um outside of that, I'm trying to think. Probably the CRG with Dave as well.
right.
Um but yeah,
What?
and also Limitless. I saw loads of people really liking Limitless because I feel like, well, for Central C anyway, it's his not his first time, but one of his main times of being like vulnerable from his perspective.
Right.
Um,
But Gata is interesting because it reminded me a lot of current French rap, which is just using all these Spanish sounds, like sort of Afrobeat, kind of reggaeton kind of style, and then people
mhm,
singing in Spanish. And again, this is a reminder that maybe Drake walked so that Central C could run, because this very much feels like if you listen to this, you are getting a legitimate experience with a Spanish singer, and you're getting experience with a British singer, and it's quite good. And then with the next song, St. Patrick's, I saw the credits before I listened to the song, and I saw all the members of Wu-Tang, and I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, what is this going to be? How is he going to? And then it was fine. It was actually kind of a cool trick that he did, where he sampled, or the producer sampled Cream, but then sort of slowed it down so that it matched kind of a new rhythm that then lent into his rapping.
mhm.
And this has my favorite bit of pronunciation play. Did you pick up on this one?
Oh, what's here?
These these American girls keep laughing anytime I say.
A bottle of water.
That's right. I never drink a bottle of water on screen, but I intentionally had this
That's
here.
hilarious.
And for the linguists out there, it's a question of glottal stops and the way people pronounce things. So it
Yeah.
happens to be that, Michael Caine, when he asks for a bottle of water, like that's just the sound that it makes. But I like that because to me, it shows that he really is in America, that he really does have these experiences that like
Yeah.
they're like despite everything, and I think this is something that very few stars, this is what it takes to be a star. You kind of like the guy. Now, I imagine a lot of people hate him, but for me, I just kind of feel like, oh, that's so cute. They're laughing at him for saying that. But
Yeah. And I think again, like a bar like that for me is so like it's so marketing. Like you're
mhm,
writing that because you know you're playing to a US audience that are observing the UK from an outside
right.
perspective,
Yeah.
rather than a lot of UK people who will write for the perspective of other. So you will do an in-joke that's in UK culture, not a global in-joke
Right.
from the perspective of an out like an onlooker.
Right. It'd be like if Drake was like, I'm in the hoose. It would be
Mhm.
yeah. So then we get to GBP with 21 Savage. And of all the
Yeah.
things about 21 Savage, I really appreciate that he's leaning into his Britishness. I thought that, I mean, I sort of sneakily suspect that Red Rum is going to be one of the most influential songs of the last like couple years, just because I hear production like Red Rum everywhere, and recording the video in England,
I hear
and
that. Yeah.
like the idea that England is not the Beefeaters. It's not the just for you Americans out there. Beefeaters are the names of the dudes who stand in front of the Buckingham Palace, right? That's what a Beefeater is.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's not all that. It's not all Harry Potter. It's this other thing. And I really like that about 21 Savage because he's able to bring in a little bit of immigrant based rap music into the mainstream of America. And I think it's really nice hearing him here. I like the way that he's interacting. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, no, I really like this. I think it really struck the balance again of just like a really good commercial record.
Mhm.
I think well, in my opinion, I feel like it achieved it better than Band for Band did in
Yeah.
terms of like striking that balance commercially of like because there's just so much like there's so much cultural nuance in the presentation of UK rap.
Yeah.
Um which I feel like again might be missed on some people who are just like, oh, they're just, they're just talking about different currencies. It's like,
Right.
okay, but also but also they're painting it from each cultural perspective.
And I really appreciate how many times there's references to the comparatively strong gun control in England. So I really appreciate that. If it weren't the UK, I would have had an AK-47 with 100 rounds. And it's like, you know what? It's probably good. I mean, I forget, was it Loyal Carner that had, yeah, Loyal Carner had a whole section of his album where it was a PM, some kind of prime minister, or, I don't know, MP, I'm sorry, member of parliament talking
Yeah, yeah.
about talking about knife violence. And I remember just being like, just aching with longing. Like, I mean, I know life violence is terrible, but also like, Oh, that would be so nice to have knife violence problems as opposed to gun violence problems. That he does
Yeah.
go one step I mean, so if he gets big enough, this whole bit, if I lived in Harlem, I would have been Mitch, making reference to Paid in Full and the character Money Mitch. If I was in
Yeah.
Oakland, I would have been a pimp. If it was 1930, I would have been Frank with the mink. He seems to be saying like if he was somewhere else, he would have been a black American, which to me is like that might cause him some trouble if he's sort of like drawing like a very clear parallel between his experience and the experience of black Americans throughout history. But
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah,
anyone's getting
again,
upset.
for me, this is Marcus. So if you remember, he did an LA Leakers, um, this was like a couple of years ago now, and this was really his like first real breakthrough into the US. Like it wasn't fully because it was that time that he was hanging around Drake. Um,
Right.
but yeah, he in that freestyle, he was basically doing the same thing of like, you guys call it a to like we call it a toilet, you call it a gun, we call it a whatever. And so like for him, he's just bridging the gap with a US audience.
Right.
So again, am I like it's the same Drake thing of like you're trying to relate a cultural context in another in another
Right.
culture. And I don't think it's as pernicious as the Drake thing, because the Drake thing feels very calculated sometimes of like,
Yeah.
I'm going here because this is like an ideological pawn, and then I'm moving on. Whereas I feel like he's just trying to break through. I mean, obviously there's
Yeah.
more nuance because he is riding a very thin line.
And I feel like the top freestyle was him sort of trying to say, hey, people who love rap and the skill and the art and everything, I can do it. Again, his like I could imagine hating Central Cee in 5 years, or I could imagine loving him sort of based on how he goes, because like when he's talking about like the way that he expresses vulnerability is so like flimsy. I mean, it's there at all, which is good. But again, compared to Dave, who he works with, it's fairly shallow. And so here, first time I sold crack, I was 16, all that stuff, and talking about the trauma of the streets. And again, so I do
Yeah.
wonder if it's going to be like Drake, but then he attacks the labels, and I really enjoy that. I like
Yeah,
how,
I was gonna say that was really I was really surprised at that, and he also got very much to the nuance of well, what has been the discussion in like Culture United really of
yeah,
like basically like labels exploiting the fact like basically exploiting artists in terms of pushing music that promotes violence. And him being privy to that, my concern is kind of like, okay, it's great to have the awareness, but also you're not contending with it. I think it's like I'm not sure if you heard Jack Harlow's last album
yeah.
with the I can't even remember what the intro song is called, but he has
Can't
the
remember.
same
I
thing. He
just
has the
remember the
same
album
thing.
cover. That's all I remember that album.
Yeah, the first song he has the same thing of like making observations about like the suburbs are filled with the Ebonics and Trapsonics and like all of
Right,
these parallels of like white Americans appropriating AAVE. And it's like,
right,
okay, that's great. You're making the observation, but you're not
right.
actually doing the work
Doing
on the other
something with
side.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, everybody, that's why you got to be listening to James Francis and whatever he's doing, because that's what we go to him for. And then, okay, the other problem with Americans is that we don't understand geography. Okay, and we listen, we have to know 50 states and 50 capitals, so it makes sense that we don't know anything. But y'all people in Europe don't make it easy because the way you define things is so confusing. So the next song is called Up North, and it's like, does that mean Scandinavia? Does that mean Manchester? Does that mean Liverpool? Does that mean like north of London? Or does that mean just north of the part of West London that he's from? What does up north? Because it says the gun that we got came from up north. What does north mean?
Yeah, I assume he means North London.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm assuming he means North London. I mean, obviously he could mean like Scotland, but I very much
Right.
doubt that.
Okay.
I assume he means North London.
Okay, because that's the other thing. And then another problem with British rappers is their allegiances in football, in soccer as we call it in America, are just totally incoherent. Because like most of them support Manchester United if they're from London, which has always bugged me. And I can't figure out. I think this guy, I think Central C's supports Chelsea. Is that correct? Is that what you know?
I actually don't know. I used to support Man U, but I don't even follow football anymore.
No. Well, I got to tell you, if you're from London, the team to support is Fulham because they're so lame and
Oh, here we go.
everything that sucks about London being like too rich and lame and all that stuff, like you can ironically support Fulham and their stupid cottage and like all their stupid rich fans. And anyways, that's the team I support in the Premier League. I think now is
Oh,
just
that's
just because
hilarious.
it really pisses. I mainly study. Marseille is my main team. They have their own problems.
Mhm.
But like you can really piss off people like, I love Fulham. What? No, 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 don't love Fulham. But anyways, that's for Americans, it's usually very clear. It's like, okay, maybe Jay-Z likes the Yankees and Nas likes the Mets, depending on what borough you're from. But you just anyway, you can't the sports to rap connections is fairly hard to follow.
Mhm.
I do think that he is very good at doing corny lines. German stick, they call it a sig, even though no smoking allowed. It's just, it's
Yes.
just so
He does a
corny.
lot of these. He does a lot of these, and I'm just like, really? But also, I think, like you said, it's part of the charm.
It's
I
part of the
think
charm.
again, Drake does some of these. I just like, what was the one? He says, what was it? It was on like stories about my brother, and he says like,
Mhm.
your last album was Buns, you're Hawaiian as well. I'm just like, terrible bar. But that's quite fun. Yeah.
But then later, all of us raised by single women taught ourselves how to be a man, how to become a man. That's a well-worn subject, but still always important to say, always important to mention.
Hmm.
And then he had this little detail about how he used to write his name in the frost on the window. And when I heard that, I was like, hey, wait a minute. This guy might be actually a really good rapper. Because that's like, I don't know if you remember writing your name in the frost on the window. I remember
Hmm.
doing that. I remember like every time I would get onto a typewriter or teach myself how to type, I would just type out the words, my full name, Sky Payne is the best, Sky Payne is the best, over and over and over again. That's how I taught myself how to type. Like these little things you do when you're small and you feel small, like writing your name in the frost. And like, to me, that was like, wait a minute, he could be doing this. Maybe in 5 or 10 years, he will be more like Dave and less like Drake.
Yeah, I think we'll have to see. I think because yeah, I think especially on the towards the conclusion of the album where he's talking about like I don't really even need a classic, I could just retire. I'm
Yep.
just like that mentality for me is so anti
Yeah.
it's not anti hip hop, but it's so anti his hip hop trajectory in terms of like
Yep.
you've got so much more growing to do as an MC.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really comes through on the song CRG. What does CRG mean? Do you know?
I actually haven't thought about
Okay,
it.
because it's not on Genius. Anyways, it's featuring Dave, and to me,
I
I
assume
think,
it's the title, right? It's Can't Rush Greatness.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. You see,
Yeah.
right there, I didn't even put that together. This is why you need someone to teach the prof common sense. To me, this did two things. It was a To me, I thought that Central C was bringing his game up on this, and then it's just a reminder of why Dave is my favorite MC from the UK. I mean, it's between him and Lil Sims, and I feel kind of weird and guilty because they win all the Mercury prizes, right? Like they win all or
Yeah.
the Brits or whatever it is. So I kind of feel like it's just like the respectable British rappers to like. But I can't help it. Just it's this whole line 40,000 square feet off of this pain. Look at me. I got heart acres, but I don't know what heartache is. I can't act known for a teaspoon of sugar. It's tough. I got no neighbors. This is a whole theme on the album. It's probably the most repeated theme on the album is not having neighbors and the need to not
Yeah.
have neighbors, which is, as an American, weird because it's like the coolest thing about Europe is that even when you get rich, you still get to live in a city with mixed use housing and you still get to have a cafe down the street and you still get to have a bakery like oh my God.
Yeah. It's a very like lonely at the top mentality. It's a very like
Yeah.
at times very like crabs in a barrel mentality.
Yep.
Um but yeah, I think sometimes a lot of that is just framed again. I mean, I don't want to make everything about the US, but a lot of the time it's framed from a US perspective of like people's perspective of breaking throughout the UK is often through a Hollywood lens. And so
Yep.
that's why it can be a very much like a survivor's guilt or a lonely at the top mentality of like, oh, I'm the only one who broke out. Um,
Yeah. And then the next one I have is just I just wrote skip on there. This felt to me limitless. You mentioned it as being one that people really like. I felt it as being very consciously Drake-like, where he's complaining about his life. Um, but actually, no, there were some good lyrics on it. Oh, that's the one that did the thing where he said, actually, wait, why am I saying skip? That's actually some pretty cool stuff in there because he talked about me and my girl bumping heads, feel like I'm speaking, and he doesn't say Spanish, and then he
And
starts
then he says,
rapping.
yeah,
Yeah,
in
and he says
Spanish.
"Cómo estás? Muy bien." That's that European aspect, which I really appreciated. But if you have anything to say about the song after now that I've said it's bad and good at the same time,
Yeah. Okay. So I felt like the again, this is very Drake attitude, but
yeah,
like the Limitless film reference, like it takes more than just a surface level to understand
yeah,
the film reference. Um, and also, yeah, just like a couple, like the other side of it of like him saying, what does he say? He says like, oh, like I'm writing a verse. Um, my sis told me like my niece is listening. Like, there's just a level of self-awareness, but it's like a third person self-awareness. It's like a self-awareness
right,
knowing I'm being observed, which is
right,
so weird. I think that's the part again that makes it feel like marketing to some people because it's
right.
not like first person I'm I'm in the experience self-awareness. It's I am being observed and understand I'm being observed. And yeah, I think that can be detachment for some people.
Yeah.
Um,
You see, once again, that's why you go to James Francis. All right. Now the next one, I think I have to skip Now We're Strangers because this has got some Spanish guitars and high singing. I just wrote, "Oh Jesus." Those are my notes on there. I just wrote, "Oh Jesus," and then Truth and the Lies featuring Lil Durk. I just like the synthesizer sound here because it reminded me of the fountains in a Zelda game. I was like, do 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 do. But I like that they match each other kind of line for line. Like he does a good job of integrating with his features. But then it's just
yeah.
a lot of just really gross sex stuff from Dirk. And I just
Yeah, I was
I
just like,
I think
why?
I've now reached the point where I know enough about because so much of my rap life came through Kanye, so I didn't understand the difference between different Atlanta rappers really up until Donda, and then that forced me to understand the difference between Lil Baby and Da Baby and all that. And like with Lil Durk, he's on that album too, and so I've always just kind of given him a pass. But I think I don't like Lil Durk. I think I'm just gonna say that, and we'll see. And then we get to 10. And then this has made me wish that I knew more about Skepta because this was where I understood the difference and I got really into Skepta's verse. So what do you think? Is Skepta good?
Yeah, Skepta is an insane MC. I feel like okay, so well, Skepta is one of the people that Drake worked it with during his
Yeah.
like more life era.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Skepta is really good. He's very good also at doing what Central C does, but from like an MC perspective, like because
Okay.
he's a grime MC who went commercial, whereas I feel like Central C often leads more with the marketing.
Right.
But yeah, this verse, Skepta is deliberately holding back, but it fits the
Really?
song, and it's a really high level verse from that perspective of just like it's just good commercial writing. But yeah, I really like also there's this thing um like that's very much a grime MC thing of like you keep the punchline the same thing and then you just change the setup. So like
Okay.
how the whole thing he's doing is like da 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 10 da 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 10. Like it's such a grime MC thing to do.
Yeah. All right.
Um yeah.
I didn't know that. So another thing to know about James Francis's work, if you're not familiar with him, you probably are if you're in the whole YouTube rap space. But if not, like you do a lot of great rhyme breakdowns, which must take you a ton of time. I mean, I do them sometimes, but I do them with highlighters. I literally print them out and do them highlight. I do it like I'm not comfortable with calling myself Unc because I feel like that's an appropriated term, but I will call myself Uncle. I'm comfortable with that. So I do it Uncle style. But yeah, so have you ever done one of a Skeptaverse?
No, I need to. I need to. But yeah, no, I've done I was gonna do I was actually gonna do Central C's on CRG and then somebody else did it already.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
Because
annoying.
yeah, no, Central C on CRG is I
He's
was so surprised. He's doing like this is also the other thing I wanted to mention.
yeah.
A lot of UK drill rappers don't get they don't get the credit for being good lyricists.
Hmm.
And specifically they don't get the credit for being good at rhyme schemes. Like
Right.
Central C like consistently in his writing he does like three syllable like multi-syllable rhyme schemes. But he will never get credit for it. On CRG, he's
Right.
doing like four syllable multis and just no credit because people have the perception already of like, oh, it's drill. So like they're just so desensitized to it. And I get it. But yeah, sometimes the writing is really good and it just doesn't get noticed.
Yeah, well, that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on because, like like discernment is the skill, and that's like the main skill
Mhm.
for the 21st century. I've been saying it for 25 years now, that because we have access to everything, discerning between everything is going to be our main skill. And it's very easy just to say, I don't get British rap, it all sounds the same, just whatever. But this, what you just said about that format of grime rappers, like I didn't know that, and I've now learned that, and I now get to think about that, and that's kind of an exciting thing
Mhm.
to think about going forward. Band for band, this is the one I thought was the most stock drill beat. This one felt to me like it was actually just trying to be that, and this,
Yeah, it was
yeah,
already a single. It was
yeah,
like the leading single, and that's what I was kind of like. I feel like it should have been left off the album,
yeah,
especially in terms of the track order. Like there
yeah,
were so many other things that like it would have made sense to just go to the next track, even though I have some issues about Gen Z, Gen
yeah.
Z love.
So,
But yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I when I said to my daughter I was reviewing this, she was like, "The band for band, yacht for yacht guy," and I was like, "Yeah." And then I listened to the song, and he never says yacht for yacht. So is there some other version, or did my daughter just write that line?
I have no idea. I have no
Anyways,
idea. But yeah,
goat to spitting bars here. Yeah, and then Gen Z Love. When I saw this title on the track listing, I was like, oh Jesus, this is gonna be right. I don't know what this is, but I gotta be honest. Part of what I teach is how music reflects culture, how it reflects society. And this
yeah, I
song,
was thinking about this.
it is as though it was created for a college professor to be like, so I found a rap song that describes exactly the mating rituals of people across the world in 2020s, and it's if it weren't for the algorithm, I wouldn't have found my woman. And listen, I understand the hate and all that, but this is a great lyric. It's simple, it's true. It's like, I found my wife on a dating app. You know what I mean? I mean, it wasn't quite the same thing as an algorithm because we did have to sort of choose things, but still, like the 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 despair that comes over you when you say this sentence and the hope and the joy. I don't know. I like it. Maybe you have a different
Yeah,
take.
again from a songwriting perspective, like as a listener, I don't like the song. But from like an anthropology, like in terms of
Right.
like distilling the essence of distilling the essence of modern dating, incredibly well written.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I just don't like the sentiment.
Yeah.
It's a bit dystopian.
Yeah. And then
Um,
walk-in wardrobe is the best example of I had this and now I have that. I do what I
mhm.
found interesting was the lyric apparently is when I release, I compete with the Americans. I thought he said when I release, I can't compete with the Americans, which
Oh,
I thought would
really?
have would have actually been a more interesting line because, like it would have shown like sort of like bitterness and frustration. But it like the whole first half is not great. And then there's this beat change with Kai Cenat jumping on there.
Mhm.
And then I really like the second half where that's the thing where he's talking about not needing to be successful, which is very tied into West Side Gun, where he's sort of like, do you care? I can't tell if you care. I mean, I guess I'll care, but
Yeah. He
um,
also he repeats the Mitch thing as well.
he does.
The,
I felt
he
like
repeats the Mitch
Mitch. I
thing.
felt like Meech. And I mean, I love Paid in Full as much as anybody, but I don't know
Yeah.
if you need two references to it. But I do like the line. They say I sold my soul. I ain't even sold my masters. I think that's, in the again, going in the future when we talk about how we think about this time in music, the discussion around who owns the masters of music, this will be another great example, another great line in someone's dissertation about the fight over music ownership in the 2020s.
Hmm.
Must be, I don't, they don't want smoke, so it must be the vape. I don't know, James
Yeah,
Francis. I
I was not a fan of that bar. I was not. I feel like this just okay. I just feel like this doesn't like a lot of some of the other songs, even though like the actual sentiment of them feel a bit empty. At least he has a self-awareness. I feel like this is missing it, even
yeah.
that.
But the last track, Don't Know Anymore, is the most consciously addressing his upbringing, talking about his dad is paralyzed and he see, I remember I had one pair of Air Forces trying to keep out the creases. Now the front drive looks like a showroom and none of them leases. That's like a I've got and I used to got line, but in general,
Mhm.
it was a pretty good ending to the album. I don't know what your thought was there.
Yeah, I feel like I really enjoyed how again, this is why I'm always so split because I'm like, is this the bare minimum? I feel like this is my question with Central Cee all the time of just like, okay, you're being vulnerable, but also this is the type of thing that like I would get on like a J. Cole for. And obviously, different artists, different
Yep.
expectations. Cole is not making commercial rap records that you have a perspective are just gonna be like in and out of the charts.
Yep.
But again, is this like is this great commercial writing? Yes, but also is the bar really low?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm convinced.
Okay, well then good. I think that's our review of the album. And it sounds to me like your general take on Central C is positive with a pause.
Yeah, as positive with an asterisk.
Yeah.
I think ultimately the like overarching hate that Central Cee gets, I think is unprecedented.
Yep.
And also as an artist, I feel like it's part and parcel of being a good artist, like is to rock the boat a bit, to upset. Like
Yep.
even think of Kendrick, even before the beef.
Yep.
Um like the whole Damn only exists because of the backlash of To Pimp a Butterfly,
Yep.
essentially. Um, so like that aspect, I respect, like understanding that like he even said that like controversy sells. Um, but yeah, I'm just like waiting for the ball to drop of just like you're just like so almost there. It's just like that
Yep.
last 10% of just completing the thought of the vulnerability,
Yep.
completing the thought of the self-awareness of like, okay, label execs are messing people over. It's like, okay, then also, what part do you play? And that's like the
Yep.
last little bit. Um, so yeah,
All right, then, but before we get to sort of your promo, so I have an idea of doing quick questions that hopefully we can answer like in under a minute, so that maybe I could put them as like a little chunk, like a little YouTube short kind of thing, right?
sure.
So I sent you the questions, and we'll see if we can get through them in a minute. Okay, are you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
What is your first rap memory?
Lauren Hill. My mom used to play Lauren Hill
Okay, your mom playing Lauryn Hill, CD or
just on the internet.
on the internet. Okay, you see,
Yeah.
what is your favorite rap album?
To Pimp a Butterfly.
Oh, okay. Your favorite rapper now?
Kendrick.
Okay. Who do you think is the most underrated rapper?
I'm gonna go with DC3 from the UK. He is 17
Okay.
and it's an insane MC.
All right. We might have to have you back on again for DC3 then. And what is the biggest influence on your hip hop scholarship?
Um, I'd say, well, it depends. If you mean in terms of like analysis, I used to do theology, so that it probably comes from that place.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, really like Kendrick. Like Kendrick was the first person that made me see like the nuance in terms of like theology playing a part in hip hop analysis. But yeah, in terms of like people actually in the space, like dissect, obviously,
Right.
Justin Hunt, obviously. So yeah,
Awesome. Yeah. Cool. I wonder if that was under a minute.
I
I
hope so.
don't know. I never know how to do minute things. I hope, maybe your youth and knowledge of how short form content works will play to my advantage. And then just sort of a general, how like are you? I think you were saying to me somewhere that you're trying to do more stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, I want to post more on YouTube. Honestly, I'm just trying to because I'm in final year at uni, so I'm just
Oh
like,
my God. And you're in
yeah.
theology?
No, so I'm at music college for classical performance. So yeah, bass in the
Okay.
back. Um, yeah, I started bass when I was like 5. I've been a classical musician for my whole life. Um, so yeah, I've just got like my end of year recital at the end of the year in like June, end of academic year, and then I graduate in July.
I really could use your help because I'm a big fan of Black Country New Road. It's been British Week for me. I don't know why. And I was trying to describe the melody, and I made a comparison of that melody to Basso Continuo in Bach, and I was like, oh
Hmm.
geez, I'm way out over my skis here. I don't know enough about classical music for that to count. But yeah, that's awesome. So classical bass, so not even jazz.
I do play jazz, so
Okay,
I play bass guitar as well and
okay,
acoustic. But yeah, I'm at uni for classical performance.
right. Oh, I'm so just I didn't. Yeah, that's awesome. I sold my Michael Jordan rookie card to buy a Fender P bass. So
Oh man,
yeah,
that's
because I pulled the card, from a pack in 85, 86, whenever it was, and I had it for a long time. And it was literally my moment of put away childish things. I sold it at this place called Waverly Exchange for $200, and I think a Fender P bass back then cost $225. So I
I'm
went
so
I went and
jealous.
did that. Yeah, and that was like my brother told me if you want to be in a band, learn how to play bass. But then all anyone wanted was a drummer, so I ended up playing drums. So yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. So you're trying to finish your undergrad and you're trying
Yeah.
to be bigger on YouTube. So yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, just doing a lot. I'm because last year I was posting every day on Instagram and so much work. I'm not
Yeah.
doing that now.
Yeah.
But again, doing more in fourth year anyway, so it's just it's just the same split.
Yeah. Wow. Well, awesome. Well, then thank you for taking the time to do this. I'm
Thanks for
really
having me
happy
on.
that I just kind of thought like, hey, wouldn't it be fun to talk to someone who actually knows about British rap as opposed to me just being like, I like this. So yeah, awesome. Well, I'm gonna hit stop record, then you and I can finish up there. Wait, how do I like point to the microphone while I'm holding onto a micro? How do I say there's a camera? Okay, I'm just gonna hit stop on the recording now. Thank you all for watching. I haven't even done my intro yet. This is Professor Sky's Record Review, the Always Positive Music Review Show. And that's James Friend. Wait, are you on YouTube yet? Do you have a YouTube channel?
I have a YouTube channel. I'll send it to you after.
Okay, good. So go subscribe. And do you like it when people say they come from me, or would you prefer them not to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good. Then say, but don't be weird and pushy. Apparently, my viewers are weird and pushy when they go to other people's
Oh, is
channels.
it?
So don't be weird and pushy. Okay.